And hey gang, I'm MyRadar meteorologist Matthew Cappucci. Today we're looking at some of the best and worst weather depictions in Hollywood movies, asking ourselves if they're fact or purely fiction.
Paw Patrol is on a roll!
Next up we have a documentary. It is called Paw Patrol. It is based on a true story, I'm told.
Rain. Does it always rain in this lousy city?
Oh, they have a Department of Meteorology. I like that. Okay, one thing I love there, they have the meteorologists wearing lab coats, which I don't get a ton of respect from my friends as being a scientist, even though I have a degree in atmospheric sciences. I think I'd get so much more respect. We all would if we wore lab coats, so I'm all in favor of that. Oh. Okay, that's accurate. That's why I have a dog.
Okay, which one of you eggheads?
I don't do cats.
Hello.
Ah,
I'm the lead egghead, Kendra Wilson.
I've got a fire.
That's like the perfect weather
They're
name.
going to cancel it because of the rain. I hear you have a weather machine that sucks up clouds. Is that true?
You're looking at it. It's a free-floating, gyroscopically balanced, remote-controlled weather containment and analysis apparatus.
What? I don't understand a word you just said.
Well, we call it the cloud catcher. It flies around and sucks up clouds, then brings them back to the lab so we can study them.
Excellent.
Okay, let's break that down. If you sucked up a cloud, you need lower pressure to ingest whatever air was associated with the cloud. Low pressure would condense more moisture in the air and just create a bigger cloud. So you can't have that. You could just run all the air through this apparatus and extract the moisture from it. That's already invented. It's called a dehumidifier. You probably have one in your house in the wintertime or the summertime, depending on where you live in the US. So, ooh, those are differential equations. That one on the top looks so familiar. Some of these, I think, are legit meteorology equations. Well, it's nice that they actually have some math in there.
Well, kiddies, it looks like our bad weather.
Meteorologists oftentimes have to go through Calc 3 at least, linear algebra, differential equations, a lot of sexy math. So it's nice to see some of that appearing here in the movie.
Wasn't clear? The cloud catcher is for studying clouds, not for changing the weather.
And I'm sorry if I wasn't clear. Suck up.
We don't need to bring the clouds into the lab to study them. We go out and we study them in the field. Sometimes by flying planes through them. That's why the National Hurricane Center teams up with the Air Force to fly planes literally into hurricanes for research. And now they're actually doing that with nor'easters.
Scientific consensus.
My question, how is it raining outside but not inside the building when they open the ceiling skylight thing? So the other thing too, let's assume, we're going to make the assumption that this spacecraft, this aircraft, whatever they have is, let's say 5,000 pounds. It's floating, maybe it's 5,000 pounds. The average cumulus cloud, just a fair weather cumulus cloud, if you have, let's say 1 kilometer by 1 kilometer by 1 kilometer, that would weigh roughly 1,400,000,000 pounds. That is an incredible volume of water. So you're not going to be able to suck up a cumulus cloud into a little tiny spacecraft like that because you'd need many tens of thousands of Olympic-sized swimming pools, I'm sure, if not hundreds of Olympic-sized swimming pools to store all that water. That is a copious amount of water in just one little fair weather cloud. It's crazy to think that they can remain suspended in the air, but in reality, they're lighter than air because water has a molecular weight less than that of N2 or two nitrogen atoms connected in one molecule, which is what most of the atmosphere is made up of. So, yeah, cumulus clouds are heavy.
It's incredible! We'll have the sky clear by sundown.
I've got a bad feeling about this.
I'll hang on to this remote. People are going to love these fireworks. And more importantly, they're going to love me.
So this part about politicians ignoring scientists is absolutely true. Anyone who's ever heard of climate change can attest to this. Anyone who ever heard of Sharpiegate can attest to that. So yeah, that part's a thing. Everything in that scene was rubbish except that end part. So we'll give it like 90% thumbs down. But I like the scientists and I like the lab coats, so a little bit of a thumbs up.
Why did you say that 3 times? Within cells interlinked.
Within cells interlinked. Within cells interlinked. Within cells interlinked.
Next up, Blade Runner 2049. I'm skeptical if even this architecture is possible. Are we looking up or, we're looking down. Oh, that's one of those really cool mirror farms. I actually went to the world's largest mirror farm in, I believe it was Morocco. Oh, that's cool. Yeah, so the way that works, they reflect all the light towards one point, and the sun shines on different parts of the mirror array at different times of day, projects all that energy from the sunlight towards a water-containing or a salt-containing or something drum suspended on a pylon in the middle of the array that heats it up and you get this thermal energy. So either we're looking at, right off the bat, either we're looking at a lot of haze, fog, pollution. Ugh. Oh, that's gross. I understand that this is trying to be a futuristic scene of California. I know that obviously pollution that we're outputting is quite horrible. Much of California's pollution actually comes from Asia, comes across the ocean. California, even if they try to minimize their pollution requirements, it's tough to meet the benchmarks that they're supposed to, just given intercontinental pollution. I think this is obviously quite apocryphal, but it's sad to look at. I don't think we'll have flying cars in 20 years. They did get the color of the sky right. Whenever you have that much pollution, that much haze. I spent a lot of time in China, and the thing that really strikes me every time I go, when you're in cities that are very populous and have a lot of pollution, you get the sky to look exactly like that. And it's, the first time I saw it, it was actually kind of creepy. You get that and you get these like fiery red sunsets because so much of the shorter wavelengths are being filtered out that you're getting these long wavelengths, the red colors, to be selectively penetrative through the atmosphere, especially lengthwise when the sun comes through a longer fetch of the atmosphere, that the light is kind of this weird orangey red color. It's very bizarre, but I think that's really the most evocative element of that scene. We'll give them, I guess, half credit. The storyline obviously has some flaws, but the sky was kind of cool looking, and I'm always here for the sky.
The most awesome sight you will ever see may be your last.
All right, next up we have 1997's Dante's Peak, meaning there is a chance the movie is older than me, which is kind of concerning. Anywho, let's take a look. So this shaking, right off the bat, this shaking is more reminiscent of what you would actually see during an earthquake. Kind of that back and forth lateral motion, some rolling motion as well. It's good they appear to be exiting the cafeteria auditorium thing, which is also a good sign, so I'm encouraged thus far. Ooh. Oh, look at that. That's beautiful. I would absolutely love to see a volcanic eruption. Now, the earthquake probably would have wound down by now. Oftentimes with volcanic eruptions, you get a series of smaller earthquakes, and then the actual shaking itself is not so much from plate tectonics as it is from actual happenings and rumblings beneath the volcano or within the volcano. All right, so at this point, they're kind of taking the earthquake part a little bit too far. You can have rocks carried considerable distances from an actual erupting volcano, probably not more than like a quarter to half a mile for chunks of debris that large. One cool thing though, there's so much buoyancy, so much upward motion within that volcanic plume. You can have ash, soot, other materials carried upwards of 50, 60,000 feet and even inject aerosols into the stratosphere.
Paul, can anybody hear me? Paul? Paul, come in.
One of my favorite elements of what we call pyrocumulonimbus clouds is the propensity for them to actually produce lightning. In the case of volcanoes, that lightning is oftentimes purple, and we call that a dirty thunderstorm, but it's a real thing. You can get genuine lightning leaping far from these clouds. Downwind, you get anvil crawlers rippling along the underside of this 50,000-foot plume of ash and soot and smoke and all that stuff. It's really neat. And I guess soot probably isn't the right word because it's such fine material that is spewed out of these volcanoes. It's like extremely fine, small ash, not even grainy, more like a fine dust. And that can cause huge issues with breathing. If any of that reaches the ground, it can cause virtual blackouts in terms of the actual ambient sunlight disappearing. And if there's enough of it, whatever's ejected into the stratosphere can travel around the world, travel around the hemisphere, and affect how much incident radiation from the sun comes in. So volcanoes actually do have the potential to seriously impact the climate. So one thing that climate models are actually horrible at is taking into consideration the effects of volcanoes and volcanic eruptions on the atmosphere. We just don't know when the next volcano will erupt, and so we can't predict that. We can't really model that. But they can have enormous impacts on how our atmosphere behaves. For example, back in 2001, the eruption of Mount Pinatubo actually released 15 million tons of sulfur dioxide into the atmosphere. That went up into the stratosphere, interacted with water vapor to produce sulfuric acid, and that moved around the globe for the next 2-3 years and cooled the globe ever so slightly. So if you have a big enough volcanic eruption, that can actually occur, and it has big implications on the climate system. You know, I'm amazed at seeing all of these movies, how good people are at driving in adverse conditions, and yet I can barely drive around the Beltway in Washington, D.C. without seeing people who look like it's their first day ever setting foot on a road. Like right here, that's what the Beltway looks like during rush hour. Okay, so that doesn't look accurate either. Oftentimes when a volcano goes up, spews out its stuff, it will continue having all that material go all the way upwards until it hits the tropopause, the kind of ceiling of the lower atmosphere, at which point you enter the stratosphere, temperatures start to increase with height, and that caps off the lower atmosphere enough. You get this almost like anvil shape. This chimney kind of goes up, all that material is contained within that plume, and then fans outwards. And here you didn't really see that, so I'm skeptical of how they portrayed it. So overall, it's decent. They got some stuff right, they got some stuff not so right. We'll give it about a 50-50.
If you have a hunger for excitement, prepare to get served.
All right, we have one of my favorite movies, Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs. My favorite because the meteorologist finds love in the end. You see food falling from the sky. The reason I show you this clip is because back in November 2015, an EF3 tornado near Pampa, Texas actually lifted corn into the atmosphere so high that it froze and came down as frozen corn. So yes, food can fall from the sky. It oftentimes can nucleate hailstones. Yeah, it's a real thing.
This is our world. This is our home. Our only choice is to take it back.
All right, next up we have 2016's The Fifth Wave, and we're looking at a scene called The End of the World. Ooh, whatever's happening with that aircraft, it's going way too slow, it's way too low. It looks like a 4-engine, and it doesn't look to be stalling other than just kind of going straight down, which would indicate perhaps the load inside the aircraft has shifted position.
The others hit us with an electromagnetic pulse that killed all the power on the planet. No more engines, no more electricity, no more running water.
Okay, so an electromagnetic pulse that took out all the electricity on the planet would also affect the magnetic field enough to cause serious implications, I think like physical implications. You can have things like solar flares, for example, that play a role in affecting ground-based currents and ground-based systems that occurred back in 1989 when there was an electrical outage in Canada, I think for up to 2 weeks, thanks to a major solar storm that crippled infrastructure. Nowadays, we can better predict things, take things offline, and take precautions. But that's an example of electromagnetic radiation or waves that can have an impact. Here, this is just apocryphal. That's rubbish. It's nice to see that amidst the apocalypse, they still go to school. As far as I know, trees don't really come down during earthquakes because they're embedded in the ground that are shaking back and forth. The reason buildings come down is because they're not built to sway back and forth, whereas trees can kind of do that. You jiggle something, you jiggle the ground, the trees in it can kind of wave back and forth.
Go, Sam! Cassie, go!
Back during the Christmas earthquake in Sumatra in Indonesia in 2004, a lot of people actually survived by trying to cling to trees because they're so deeply rooted in the ground that even when you have an immense body of water rushing past, you can occasionally get them to remain in place. Okay, whatever this is, that would not happen. Notwithstanding the fact that the water is just remaining suspended in the air, the wave would have broken before then. There's actually mathematical relationships showing how tall a wave can get before breaking, and I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I know that's wrong. This is just scientifically irksome to watch. You know that no matter how big the wave gets, there's going to be some crazy person surfing it. That simply couldn't happen. We don't have that volume of water on Earth to do that. Even if all the ice caps melted, I think you'd be hard-pressed to get that. And to get that much of a shift, If there was enough water suddenly deposited onto Earth to flood every coastal city without a rapid warming of the atmosphere, which clearly wasn't the case here because they're wearing jackets and whatnot, then you'd literally shift how the Earth rotated and change the Earth's gravitational field. It just, yeah. Big thumbs down.
Summit team, this is Base Camp. Weather tracking shows storm building at 26,000 feet. Advise return. I repeat, advise return.
Vertical Limit, filmed back in 2000. It is the avalanche scene. So right there, the icicles on the mustache, the facial hair, that's a real thing. When you have temperatures like that, the amount of water vapor that you breathe out is enough that oftentimes it accretes, it goes right to ice on any facial hair. And as gross as it sounds, if you've ever had icicles coming out your nose, you know you're from New England. So another thing too, you can have vastly different conditions, even 500 to 1,000 feet below the summit as at the top, evinced by what you're seeing here. The visibility is near zero, you're having this storm, and you go further down the mountain, I'm sure conditions are considerably nicer. I applaud people who have the motivation to go out and do stuff like this. Stairs are enough for me. Ooh. Oh, that's terrifying. Anyone who's ever read John Krakauer's Into Thin Air knows that crevices like this are a real thing. I understand that for Everest, they have people who are experts in the mountain, but that said, it's still an incredibly dangerous thing, and I could never do anything like this. Are you safe if you fell down a 300-foot crevice? I guess at least in there, the wind chill would be significantly lesser, given that they're not exposed to the winds blowing probably 40, 50 miles per hour, as is the case here. One thing here, when you're out on a mountainside, if an avalanche occurs, about 80 to 90% of the time, it's actually set off by someone in your own traveling party. And it's not so much one big chunk of snow coming down the mountain or ice, it's more the entire hillside, the entire slope of unstable snow giving way and kind of quickly accumulating and snowballing. And within the first 5 seconds of an avalanche, you can actually reach speeds of about 80 miles per hour. If you do get caught in an avalanche, you want to make sure that you try to dig your way out or up or make at least an air pocket for yourself as quickly as possible, because the human body is about 3 times denser on average than the material of an avalanche. So you're preferentially likely to start sinking in the avalanche too. So, not good stuff. This portrayal of an avalanche is very accurate. Just the way it's descending down the slope, really picking up speed. Okay, so that part about being lifted off your feet, that's not accurate. Although, it's kind of interesting, the amount of air rushing downhill, if it reaches speeds of 80, 90 miles an hour, that'd be enough to move you. But really what's moving quickly is the snow, not the entire atmosphere. If you had warm enough conditions, you could make the argument that the amount of snow in the air would be enough to rapidly cool a very thin layer of air, which would slide down the mountain in tandem with the avalanche and would create its own kind of source of wind just by virtue of being more dense than the surrounding air. So that could, in extreme circumstances, kind of occur, but not to this extent. Well, that was a terrifying way to end up a clip. I guess we'll give like 75% accuracy, a C to C+.
New Year's is never what you expect, is it?
Happiest time of my life is when I was broke.
I think this is going to be a very interesting night.
All right, last up we have Poseidon, set back in 2006, the latest iteration of the movie. This is the capsized scene. All right, they're looking at something. Oh, is it a rogue wave? Is it a rogue wave? Yes, it's a rogue wave. My advisor back in college was actually one of the leading people who studies rogue waves and focuses on the theory behind them and is trying to lead physics into why they form. Honestly, I don't think we know enough about rogue waves to say whether or not they look like this. What I will say is that they usually come in sets, from what I understand, and it wouldn't look like one just crazy rising wave. This rogue wave too looks a little bit bigger than even the most extreme rogue waves can be. I think the worst they get is like 80 to 100 feet tall, but that said, that's normally in an environment where you have constructive interference between other waves and, oh, you have chaos unfolding here. Ooh, no, 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 no. You always want to face into the wave if you're sailing. Otherwise, you can very easily get swamped. But there have been cruise ships before that have gone into rogue waves, and I think one lost several hot tubs from the front bow deck. Oh, that's creepy. Yeah, it's not uncommon for cruise ships to actually have glass shatter because of crazy waves that will even break windows at times. This is so well produced and so incredibly eerie. My question is whether or not the duration of the wave and really how long it's applying that force to the ship would be enough to swamp it all at once, because I understand that ships have stabilizers to at least make it tougher to tilt them. I don't know the answer to that one. The fact that this one has me stumped shows it's a good movie. They really put a lot of thought into tapping into our unknown. This final sinking part right here wouldn't occur like this simply because the ship has a lot of air within the ship, keeping it afloat because the air is, of course, more buoyant than water. Oh, that's horrifying. All right, we'll give it a medium thumbs up about this eye. So it turns out that Hollywood is not filled with scientists. That said, they create stuff that is somewhat scientifically based sometimes that, of course, can entertain us, not really educate us, not really inform us, but we can always at least enjoy exploring the more niche aspects of science that occasionally is taken to the extreme. But hey, I think Paw Patrol and Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs were my personal favorites. Anyway, thanks so much for watching. Stay with us next time.
Follow MyRadar on social media: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. Download MyRadar on iOS, Android, Amazon Alexa, Xbox, and Windows.